It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of self-reliance. An Economy of One with Gary Rathbun.
This is our country.
Good evening and welcome again to An Economy of One. I am your host, Gary Rathbun. As I mentioned in the last hour, we're going to dive right into this. Joining me now is Jim Bovard. He's author of dozens of books, including Public Policy Hooligan in 2012, Attention Deficit Democracy, one of my favorites, and Lost Rights, The Destruction of American Liberty. He's also published in USA Today, Washington Times, Wall Street Journal, and many other publications. Jim, this is a true honor for me. Welcome to An Economy of One.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate that.
This is been looking forward to this all day. So I almost don't know where to start. I've read so much of your stuff, and I think we've spent most of the show tonight talking about socialism and democracy socialism. You've written a lot about democracy, of course, for the Mises Institute, and certainly attention deficit democracy touches on a lot of this. You know, it seems like, and you recently wrote that government is dividing Americans into two classes: those that work for a living and those that vote for a living. Which group is larger, and why are we seeing such an acceptance of socialism today?
Well, it's hard to get hard numbers for the size of each group, partly because the government doesn't. The government's numbers on handout recipients, there's a lot of overlap. Some of the programs don't do a very thorough job of reporting. Sometimes the data relies on self-reporting by recipients, and they often leave out the fact that they're getting food stamps or some other program. So it's hard to get hard numbers, but the thing that's striking is a radical change over the last several decades. For instance, simply from 1983, when Ronald Reagan was president, the number of people who are getting aid from the federal government has more than doubled. It went from 66 million to 153 million. And this is at a time of relative prosperity. It's not like we've been laboring in the 1930s Great Depression for that period. But the federal government, a lot of the federal programs have been so busy trying to sign up new recipients. Food stamps is close to the front of the list on that. Right. And you've had other programs that are basically making a point to give free meals to anyone. It doesn't matter if they're needy or not. A lot of the school lunch and school breakfast programs are doing that now. And there's a fair amount of evidence that the government feeding programs are part of the reason for some of the obesity crisis.
Yeah, I can certainly believe that. The numbers, like you said, I know they've more than doubled to 100 and some million. But does that also include like veterans benefits or Social Security benefits, or is that outside of those numbers as well?
Well, the 153 million would include that, Social Security, veterans benefits. There's a separate number. That's the number of people who are getting means-tested handout programs. And something like that would not include veterans benefits or Social Security. But that number has also more than doubled since 1983, from 42 million to 109 million.
Wow, that's incredible. You know, I'm a baby boomer. I was born in the late 50s, and I can remember as a kid going to the grocery store with my mom and seeing somebody pay with food stamps, and that was a topic of discussion at the dinner table that night, that, so-and-so had food stamps. It seems like the pride of self-reliance has been replaced with a certain shamelessness or certain victimhood. What happened here? Where did we lose that pride in being that rugged American, independent, I can do it myself kind of attitude to, hey, I'm going to get everything I can get, whether I deserve it or not, or whether I need it or not?
Well, there's a number of reasons for the cultural shifts, but part of it is government propaganda, because the food stamp program has had decades of propaganda in which they have attacked people for their pride. and basically insulted them for that, and encouraged them, that trying to undermine people's pride and independence. And it's been fairly effective. It's certainly helped them boost the food stamp rolls. I mean, back in 2000, I think there were about 19 or 20 million people on food stamps. Now it's around 45 or 46 million in 15 years. So, and the cost of the program has gone up far faster because of the food stamp program has become more, shall we say, generous, which has helped attract more people to it. But another wrinkle on that is back in the 70s and early 80s, if someone had food stamps, you go to the checkout thing and you pull out your food stamps. Right. What the government has done is instead give people charge cards, basically, that look like they're a normal credit card. Here in the state of Maryland, the food stamp cards are called independence cards. They're not independent for the taxpayers.
Right.
And there's a lot of other states that have come up with these kind of jazzy names for them. I think in Oregon they're called the Oregon Trail cards. California's got a zippity name. And it's doing everything that they could to place the food stamp recipients on equal footing with the credit card users.
Right.
But it's interesting, for the vast majority of government programs, we have some right as taxpayers to know how the money's spent. Not so with food stamps, because the government has covered up how people use their food stamp benefits. Right. It'd be very easy to get a printout number to see what people bought at Walmart with food stamps. USDA has covered that up because it would ruin the program's credibility.
Yeah. You bring up a couple points that I've just talked about in recent shows. One is, did you see what Maine did, the state of Maine did, regarding their food stamp program and the results they had? I mean, they asked people, and they didn't ask, they told people, you will work, or you will be trained for work, or you will volunteer. And it's like 6 hours a week or something. And their rolls went down by 80%. I mean,
was it 80%? Okay.
80% fewer people on food stamps after they implemented that program. And so that, I don't know quite how to read that, whether there's a tremendous amount of fraud in there or whether there's a tremendous amount of people moving to Vermont now. I don't know. I don't know which way it goes, but
I've heard a little bit about the Maine. I've heard some about the reforms. I'm not up to speed on that. I'd not heard that it had such a big impact, but the Maine governor is trying to take a stand on this. Something a number of governors have done around the country is try to reform the food stamps so that people can no longer buy junk food with it.
Right.
USDA, the Obama administration, has fought that tooth and nail and vetoed every such effort, even though you've got a very high percentage of food stamp recipients, adults, especially women, who are obese. But it doesn't matter. I mean, it's a question of equal rights to spend the money as they please, even though even when it's obvious, there are some very adverse health consequences.
Well, and it was just yesterday or the day before, I believe, Jim, that read an article about the Agricultural Department and the food stamp program trying to require stores to carry a certain number of fresh food choices, or they wouldn't be able to accept food stamps anymore. So they're attacking it on the other side, and of course, I think the unintended consequences of that are going to be exactly the opposite of what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, something that the USDA has tried to is claiming that the food deserts, so-called food deserts, are the reason why a lot of food stamp recipients make very poor use of their food stamps. But other studies have shown that isn't the case. I mean, that not all of them, and there are some folks who really need food stamps. Sure. There are folks who it makes all the difference in the world for them. But as the program has mushroomed, you've had a lot more people coming in at the margins, and with the main reforms, I think that may be what lowered the rolls rapidly, was that you had people who, it's fine if it's a free handout, but if it's 6 hours a week, it's not worth it.
I'm not that hungry right now. So.
Well, it's not a question of being hungry. It's a question of having to make some effort for what was previously free money, because food stamps are basically free money.
Well, and the free, and also in one of the things you wrote, it's so easy and unembarrassing now. I mean, you can apply for that over the over the internet, can't you? Can't you get food stamps just by going online and filling out the right stuff on the site?
Yeah, that's my understanding. And especially under Obama, what they've done, they made it much easier to get food stamps than to go to a job interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, it's not necessary to put on a clean shirt to apply for food stamps.
or any shirt, for that matter.
That's true.
We're talking with Jim Bovard, author of several books on the failures in Washington, including Attention Deficit Democracy. Jim, I got a few more questions. Can you hang on through the break and chat a little more? I'm Gary Rathbun. This is an Economy of One.
This is an Economy of One with Gary Rathbun.
We're talking with Jim Bovard. He's the author of a dozen books, including Attention Deficit Democracy, Freedom and Change, The Rise of the State and the Demise of the Citizen, and one of my favorites, Lost Rights, The Destruction of American Liberty. Jim, in a recent article that you wrote, it was in relation to talking about Rand Paul, but you used the phrase that kind of stuck with me called Americans' apathy on freedom. And does that apathy come from, politicians buying votes with taxpayer money, or and making more and more people dependent on the goodies coming out of Washington? Where is that apathy coming from?
Well, I think it's coming from a bunch of different places. There's a cultural shift. I think a lot of people simply don't understand why personal independence should be a supreme value. People have forgotten that politicians are dangerous. People have forgotten American history. I mean, so many folks are utterly clueless about anything that happened before the last year's American Idol. You had mentioned that you were born in the late 50s. You were someone who came of age during the great inflation of the 1970s.
Yep.
During Watergate, during the end of the Vietnam War debacle. There were so many landmarks that people, 40 and maybe a little bit older, have in their minds of government treachery and political treachery. Right. Nixon and being driven out of office, and it just seems as if people have become a lot more gullible. And that's part of the reason that Obama got elected. That's part of the reason George Bush got elected twice. So, and Lord knows who we're going to elect this year. But, I mean, it seems as if a lot of people have lost their BS radars as far as politicians. And because I see the size of lies that politicians are getting away with, and I'm just thinking, the audience is buying this? And then I suddenly realize, well, I guess I'm the one who's out of step. I'm happy to be out of step, but there is just folks. Folks have tolerated so much nonsense and abuses and waste and excessive taxation from Washington. I mean, something as simple as the Federal Reserve wrecking the incentive for savings for 6 or 7 or 8 years in a row now. I mean, and I'm not seeing any politician aside from Ron Paul and maybe one or two others who raised hell about this. But, I mean, this is crucifying the middle class and older Americans who rely on savings. And it's amazing that this is not controversial.
Well, I mean, it seems like the objectiveness is gone. I mean, people get behind a candidate, get behind a politician, and it just doesn't matter what they do, what they say. He's our guy, he's our gal. Right or wrong, we're going to support him, and the objectivity seems to have gone out of many people's thinking when it comes to these politicians.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if a lot of people have given their souls to the politician, and it doesn't matter what the politician does. I mean, there were a lot of Republicans that acted that way with George W. Bush. A lot of Democrats act that way with Obama. And it's frustrating that more people don't say, well, okay, he's this party or that party, and this is his title. He's a human being, and he's lying, and he has power, and he's dangerous.
Right.
I mean, it seems like a very simple equation on how to judge politicians, and not all politicians are bad.
Right.
Most of them, they are. But, you know.
As a general rule, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, these are people who are driven by lust for power.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, if you can't realize why that's not a healthy trait, then you must have spent a lot of time with government indoctrination.
Well, and you know, I'm not a parent, but I almost adopt the policy. You know, if you can't see that, you get what you deserve. The trouble is, I get what I don't deserve by their support. So it's kind of a two-edged thing, you know.
Yeah, and you know, there's an old saying that every country has a government which it deserves.
Right.
Well, this is BS because I don't deserve Obama,
right,
and you don't deserve Obama, and the person who wins this year, you and I probably won't deserve them either. And you know, I'm speaking out, you're speaking out. Maybe they'll do some good, maybe not. I don't know, but it's one of the profound defects in a democracy that a politician only has to con 51% of the people for one day every few years
right,
in order to seize more power over everybody.
Well, and I forget who was it, Alexis de Tocqueville, that said when the politicians figure out they can get votes by bribing people with their own money, and when the electorate figures out that they can vote themselves money, the game is pretty much over at that point. And we're getting pretty close to that, I think.
Well, and there's just more of a sense of stampede, and it's just, I mean, it's frustrating watching Congress. You know, it seems like every 6 months it raises the federal debt ceiling by another $1 trillion or $2 trillion. And like, you know, someday that money's going to need to be paid back, or else the currency is going to have to be run into the ground to pay off that debt.
Right.
And there is no awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. I got about a minute of your time left, Jim. I'd like to switch gears radically, if I can. You wrote some interesting stuff about President Obama's anti-gun stuff that he came up with both before the State of the Union address and after the State of the Union address. I'm a big concealed carry advocate, a big Second Amendment advocate, and I really jumped on I didn't really jump on the gun show loophole. That's not really a loophole. I jumped on the mental health issue in his statement. And what's you had a lot to say about that. What's your thoughts in the next 45 seconds on I know that's not fair, but
45 seconds is as deep as I am on the subject.
Okay.
No, I'm in full agreement with you. I mean, I don't trust the government imposing a mental health test for gun ownership. I mean, partly because the American Psychiatric Association is always inventing new mental illnesses,
right,
which are many of which are very dubious. And one I think I've heard bandied about is that there's a mental illness where you distrust authority. And I'm thinking, whoa, I'm in the crosshairs on that one.
Yeah, I'm toast, no question. But it was funny because about a week after that, the CDC came out and said that they feel that, or somebody came out, not been the CDC, every adult in America needs to be tested at least once a year for depression.
Oh, God, yes.
You know, because depression goes undiagnosed, and these poor people, they need to be treated. Well, geez, that's scary.
Well, it was good news for the price of pharmaceuticals.
That's probably true. Good news for that profession. So we've been talking with Jim Bovard, author of several books, including Attention Deficit Democracy, and a lot of articles. He's at, I think your website is jimbovard.com. Is that right?
That's it. Yep. Thanks for mentioning it.
And we'll put your books on our website and your website on our website. Once again, Jim, this has been a true treat for me. I appreciate your time taken away from your family this evening, and I hope we get a chance to tap you on the shoulder again soon and chat with you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on the air, Gary. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. We'll talk again soon. I'm Gary Rapp.